Good morning. It's Thursday, December 5th in Altoona, Iowa. Yesterday, Wednesday, I drove from here to Ames, Iowa, the home of Iowa State University. I attended a speech by Vice President Joe Biden as the kickoff of his No Malarkey tour. It's about an hour's drive from here. When I arrived at the address listed, which was the South Ballroom at a specific street address, I had no clue where to go. As I got out and plugged the meter, a red pickup pulled up behind me. I knocked on the window and asked the driver if he knew where the South Ballroom was. He said he was going the same place I was, and he got out of the car and pointed to a huge marble building which turned out to be the Student Union building. I didn't need directions. I then walked to the Student Union building, went up one flight of stairs, went into what turned out to be the Student Commons, and then went up another flight of stairs. It was only at the landing below the top floor that there was the first Biden sign, and I followed it and walked in. The doors had opened at 10:45. The speech was supposed to start at 11:15. I was there before 11, and as usual in Iowa, the place was packed already. Fortunately, they were adding one more set of chairs to the audience, and I was able to get a chair. I ended up sitting next to two interesting people, one of whom was an 82-year-old retired man who actually asked one of the questions of Joe Biden. The other was a very nice-looking linguistics professor who was attending simply because she had no student appointments on her calendar for that time, and although she was at work as a teacher, she could drop next door and attend the speech. I asked her who she was supporting, and she said Biden. Several observations. First of all, I saw few, if any, students in the audience. There were young people there, but they all appeared to be working for Joe Biden. This was at the Student Union. There were students everywhere, and there were essentially none in the audience. I'm not sure what the audience consisted of, faculty members, adult residents of Ames, Iowa. Secondly, I contrast in my mind this speech by Joe Biden to Elizabeth Warren's speech in Stevens Auditorium on the same campus. Stevens Auditorium holds 4,000 people in comfort, and it's a real theater. This room might have held 400 people, possibly 500 people. Hats off to the Biden campaign, though, because we all had a seat. There were 50 to 75 press people there, and there were tables full of reporters with laptops and whatnot. The point is, there were a lot of press at this event, in the neighborhood of more than 10%, possibly 15% of the entire audience was press. To my pleasure, Joe's speech was not a repeat of his stump speech. I'm not sure he has a stump speech yet. Not much of what he said is a repeat of what he said in Fort Dodge, and you can review that video in a link at the end of this. The questions and answers were different also until we got to the final two. When the event was over and I left, I found his No Malarkey bus parked right outside the Student Union. Again, no students were paying any attention to it at all. It was 12:45 or 12:50 before I got back to my car. My parking meter had expired. I didn't have a ticket, but for a speech that was supposed to start at 11:15, it didn't start until 11:30 to 11:45, so I would say he was at least a half hour behind schedule. Joe is working on cutting his verbosity down, but he still runs long in his answers, so I may not put up all of the questions and answers. It depends on the subject area and how interesting his answer is.
I think that's the reason why Mayor Pete's urged ahead, is he was spending a lot of time here, talking to everybody. He was a shiny new thing. So that's what people see. And so you need to get out there as the shiny new thing for us, and I'd like to know how you're going to do that.
We're going to start off by shaking your hand and saying, I need your vote. That's what I'm going to start off. We're being serious. Look, my dad used to have an expression. He said, Joey, half a win is showing up. And we're going to be here a lot. One of the drawbacks that I had, quite frankly, early on was that I didn't decide to run until I was very late in the process and had to begin to put things together from scratch because I hadn't planned on running. But I'll tell you the God's truth, because I knew how ugly this campaign was going to be. And I have 5 grandchildren, and we have a rule in our house, this is the God's truth, that any child can ask for a family meeting. And we had the meeting, and they started off and said, "Pop, we want you to run for president." Because Daddy and each of their daddies said, deceased Daddy and my son Hunter, they want you to run. And we think you should. And before I could do anything else, my little one, little Hunter Biden, took out his cell phone. He's now in 8th grade, and showed me a picture of me walking out of the funeral for my son Bo in a flag red coffin. He was the Attorney General, but he also was he spent a year in Iraq, and before that he was in Kosovo. By the way, he's the only non-American that a war memorial has been built to him in Kosovo because of what he's done by the Kosovo government. But my point is, I had my hand on a flag red coffin. I was leaning down, and I was comforting my little grandson, and I had my hand under his chin, like I used to hold his daddy. And he showed me, and he said, and there was a notation underneath it. I'm not suggesting it was from Trump or not, but the notation underneath was, "Biden molests another child." And that's when we decided that when they decided to do it, Joe and I then met, we decided we were going to run. But the other thing I also know about you Iowans, I won't call you fickle, but you usually don't make up your mind until pretty late in the game. Because where I come from, you ask. You have to ask. I'm asking you all. I'm asking for your vote. I'm asking for your consideration. And I know it's not like walking up and pulling a lever. It's like walking in on a cold, cold night and sitting in a gymnasium and staying there for anywhere from an hour to 3 hours. So thank you for all of what you do, and I appreciate you considering it. But the bottom line is, we are in a position to be able to grow this country in a way that we've never been able to grow it because the public has gotten a good look at what has gone by. You know, I'll give you an example. In the 2018 election, the off-year election, I was the only one that I'm aware of invited into 24 states to campaign. They were red states and they were purple states. And I was presumptuous enough to suggest we'd win back at least 41 seats in the House of Representatives, beating sitting Republicans. And we did. You know why I was confident we would do that? Until Obamacare started to be taken away, no one knew it was Obamacare. And all of a sudden, when you said, by the way, no longer can your child, if they're autistic, be covered because they have a pre-existing condition, you have to pay the element for that, and you couldn't afford the insurance, they went, whoa, I thought this was, everybody supported the fact that my child could be covered. Or the 20 million people who had never had coverage before now have it. They could go on, I won't. And we won back seats across the country. And we won back governor seats. Because people now know, oh, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that. And because one of the things I used to say to Barack, I said, you ought to take a victory lap, Mr. President. He's a humble guy. I said, no, we don't have time for a victory lap. We don't have time. We have to deal with the next problem that's in front of us. And so we, in fact, I think, have an opportunity that hadn't existed for any president in the last 25 years to fundamentally change the direction of the country in the way that people embrace it, including independents and some Republicans.
And what hit me was that you're running for repairman. I want to ask you how you're going to repair what's been done internationally. Vice President, thank you.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the question, number one. Number two, I think you are absolutely correct. As I said at the outset, we're going to inherit a world, the next president's going to inherit a world in disarray. And number three, if I could, it wasn't part of the question, but it was implied, but I'm not just going to repair. I want to build on what Barack and I left, because there's a new, we face different problems than we inherited in the first go-round when we were there for 8 years. And so it's not just going back to, it's evolving beyond where we wanted to go to begin with, the next steps to grow the country. But in terms of repairing the relationships around the world, I've learned 3 things in the last 3 weeks or so, and you all have seen it on television as well. Number 1, Vladimir Putin knows I know him, and he doesn't want me to be president. No, I'm serious. They're spending an awful lot of money doing these bots to try to take me down, interfering already. Even Facebook has not let their ads go up on the air anymore. These false ads, the Russians were paying a lot of money to make sure that they hurt me, but they're still engaged in making sure. He does not want me to be president because he knows I know him and he knows me. Not a joke. Not a joke. Number 1. Number 2, I learned that Kim Jong-un, who keeps receiving love letters from the president, said, the official news agency said, Joe Biden is a rabid dog and should be beaten to death with a stick. That's the official position of North Korea. I'm very proud of that. And by the way, he then got another love letter from Trump. And then he said to Trump, by the way, we're going to send you a Christmas gift. And he's threatening us, our security. This is a president who has no idea what he is doing. None. Think of the major, totally apolitical, or maybe even conservative leaders in our military who have come out on retirement publicly, hadn't happened before, publicly, and talked about what a disaster the president has been to the United States foreign policy and the military. I mean, these are real hard-nosed folks that I've known for a long time, and they are not political. And so the third thing we know is that Donald Trump doesn't want me to be the nominee. That's why he's spending over $10 million flat lying about me. I've already been asked by foreign leaders to go to their capitals and make speeches about, before I announce, about what we would do, what American foreign policy toward Europe would be. I spoke in one of the famous 4 in London after going over to do a thing for John McCain's Institute, and the Prime Minister asked me to speak, to lay out, because the rest of Europe's wondering. I get asked in London, do we still have a special relationship? In Germany, I know the Chancellor very, very well. Spent a lot of time with her. Look what she did when I showed up at used to call it the Vergunda Conference, which is the conference that's held in Munich once a year, where all the heads of state and foreign ministers and about 30 to 40 United States congressmen and senators show up to talk about the future of NATO. And the Chancellor of Germany stood up and said, we can't rely on America anymore. I get announced, then I'm not making a judgment about him, but you had our now Vice President Pence stand up at that same meeting. You can, as my wife would say, Google it. And he stood up and he said, I'm here for the president. He made a speech. Not a single syllable was uttered by the audience. Nothing. No response at all. None. None. I get introduced and I stand up, not because I'm so special, but just my dad used to have another expression. He'd say, Joey, don't compare me to the Almighty, compare me to the alternative. So I stood up and I got a standing ovation, including from Republican senators and congresspersons in the room. Because that's how bad things are right now. And so folks, the rest of the world is ready for America to come back. And concluding comment is, when the next President of the United States gets sworn in on January 20th, he or she has to be able to stand before the world and command the attention of the world. I've met every major world leader in the last 40 years. I know most of them that are still around by their first names. The good guys and the bad guys, the good women and the bad women. I know them, and they know I know them, and they know me. And one thing we have to reestablish is the United States of America, through their president, will keep the word of America when we make it. NATO is not a protection racket. NATO is not a protection racket. NATO is essential to our long-term security. It has to be repaired. There's much more to say, but I've probably said too much already. Yes, ma'am? Very, very gracious. You know, I want to just end by saying thank you. Thank you for considering me. Democracy every 4 years starts in Iowa. It's not a joke. You are the starting gun. You hold the key to those among us who are seeking a nomination who have the best chance of going on to become the nominee. And I thank you for your consideration. I'm asking for your help, and if you can see your way through, I appreciate it very much. But if there's somebody else, whoever it is, just work like the devil to get them elected. Because one thing we cannot do, we cannot tolerate 4 more years of this president. Thank you all, and God bless.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you like this political content, please subscribe. Thank you for watching.